and noisy, there's tons of people. And both of the studio practice and both the places were very different. And I guess the idea of shadow was something, of course, like during the pandemic, it was it's constantly like going from the studio to the apartment, and like these long walks that I was taking constantly where it's me and just me. And although I realize there's people around constantly, but this idea of getting kind of lost in your thoughts, or like not necessarily being even self-aware or too much self-awareness, and this idea of having the shadow constantly with you, and even when you don't see it literally, it's still accompanying you constantly. And then also, I think I mentioned this last time, but I liked how Amy Silman had mentioned this idea of like, we have two shapes. It's us and our shadow, and we're kind of, I think she used the word trapped. I think that has a negative connotation, but we're kind of like trapped in our bodies, and we can't get out of. But the shadow is like a thing that is a portrayal of our shape, which is our body. And I don't necessarily see the shadow as like a negative thing, or negative qualities of us. I kind of see it more of as a unknown, or something that I don't know about as much. And not to say that I know a lot about myself, but at least less than what I know about who I am. And I think these thoughts were kind of like the long walks back and forth, and then suddenly being in Ohio by yourself, and then just the very stationary, whereas in Brooklyn, constantly like moving, but then yet like looking through these two very different windows into something else, whether it's what trees, or whether it's like this giant construction that's happening in front of me here. So yeah, loud versus silent, I think. And I'm constantly thinking about like surroundings and how that really affects. So yeah, so these graphite drawings are, I would say, very new to me. And then wood panel is the surface that I was drawing on. So it's a very loud surface, and I paint on burlap. So this was a very different material, because I was like hearing myself draw, because it's like layers on layers of the graphite. So it was a very different experience, like materially. To the sound element was very present versus non-present when I'm painting. So yeah, so the window and the grid and the weave of the burlap kind of come into these works. And yeah, thinking about like feeling of like muddledness, which is like sometimes you just can't differentiate between thoughts, and they all kind of, it's kind of like a hazy summer where you kind of remember a lot of things, but then you forget the details. And I think like trying to remember those details, but then also not being able to remember, but also like the idea of erasure. And I think there's this one where it's like you can see the erasure, and I think evidence of the editing, I guess, where I'm constantly like excavating through this like these like chunk of graphite, excavating through graphite, I guess is what I would say. But,
yeah, I think that I have that like Silman quote where she talks about like that being the kind of eureka moment, of that like show she created at MoMA, of like they're not, she says,
right.
The shadows are shapes and they're attached to you. You can't get rid of them. You can't, just like you can't get rid of your subjectivity. They're wherever
Right.
you go, their light, positionality, the twilight, night, death, otherness, and constant flux. And that also came up in our conversations. Maryam, I know that you talk about.
I like what Kaveri was saying about like hearing, making the drawing and then hearing the sound of just, I don't know what material exactly you were using at the moment, but like, let's say like
the graphite pencil.
Graphite, yeah. And I was like, oh, then the sound was the shadow. you know, like, and I quite like that. But again, I feel like somehow, yes, we were all like working with these ideas on our own into our work, but somehow I feel like I keep going back to Bhanu's writing because you just mentioned Amy Sillman's Shape of the Shape, and I think in one of Bhanu's like books, I think she does this survey at the beginning, like asking saying like one of the parts that I really liked was what are the shapes of our bodies, you know? Right. And I think that part then connecting it, like just thinking about the shape is that like I kind of in my work I think about that a lot, you know, the shape of the like, to find the shape of the body, you know, because I think like even when it gets to abstraction, but I go it through figuration, like what is the shape of the body, like the postures, like the yeah, and like diagrammatic way to think about it, but also like I think then shadow or shape, you know, there is I mean, not necessarily in this work, but when I do like more sequential work, like through seriality, I think about it more in cinematic way about like painting in general. And then I think the idea of shadow or silhouette become so kind of, yeah, it becomes something that I'm so interested in, like the silhouette or like, so, and I think like somehow, the shadow, I think about it in that like cinematic space of like through light or the silhouette, but also there is like fiction element to it, you know, as like Kaveri was saying, like something that it just lives with you, is with you. And in that like space of you, like you were making work at the studio and like there is that presence of the shadow. And I think I did like,
yeah, presence or absence, I guess.
Presence or absence, yeah, absolutely. I feel like in that kind of regard, I work with like some series of work that I kind of were focusing on this fictional relationship, you know, or like whatever. Like I think this like undescribable relationship between this like character that I was developing and her shadow, and it was like going through multiple desires, you know, and I found it super, like I found it very fascinating for myself because it just expanded for me a lot of conversation about like, okay, what is this, what states this character is existing, what are, you know, so I think it was all through shadow and through silhouette, and then it got into more narrative based and fictional aspects of it. Yeah.
Speaking of narrative, I'd love to like get into that more because I think that also enters into your works in various ways, but and not just like narrative, but also like time and the kind of like narrative and time being linear or non-linear. Would love to hear from you on that. Maybe we can start with Anjuli.
Yeah, I guess in these paintings, like time is not static, or it's always in flux, and the character that I'm kind of centering the paintings on is constantly flipping back and forth, being pulled in different directions between living in the dead, between being someone left behind and the deceased. Since these paintings are a lot of these paintings are dealing with the process of grief, which is not a linear process. So yeah, and these paintings, I mean, like Kaveri was saying about the shadow who's always with you. I think there's always sort of this hint of a double or a shadow self. I kind of think of them similarly in these works, who the double sort of like this monster or kind of animalistic side. And I don't think of it as like a negative thing. It's sort of a way to break narratives that we have for ourselves, like in society, our identities, life trajectories, who like we're told we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be. So yeah, this painting is sort of like this double monster being split into two, and sort of like this like fracture going in different directions. And these are all kind of like showing a point in time where there's kind of a meeting between the real and material and something beyond that. So there's like this moment of acute pain or realization when I think you can be receptive to magical thinking. And it just kind of keeps repeating throughout the paintings. Just constant fracturings. Yeah.
And maybe back to you, Maryam, because I also think that like your panels are always kind of broken up, almost like comic book panels in a way. And there's like there are always these references like to historical elements and classical elements too, with and kind of I feel like time is very much present, and or like you're thinking about time in your works.
Yeah, I think like yeah, just I mean, since this is started from narrative, you know, how does narrative like exist, and I was saying this earlier how even getting to kind of abstracting the space is more through like figuration, and I think like then in that sense I think like yeah, narrative like exists in very fragmentary way for me, you know, like it's very focusing on moments and focusing on like you were saying time, so I'm just saying like yeah, there are moments or fragmentation or parts or diagram or little like parts of narrative that kind of leaves this space that be completed by people maybe, or like open to their projection in a way that I think like I have some sort of, I think there's always some sort of like narratives or ideas behind the work, but maybe I'm interrupting that by abstracting it, or yeah, there's this level of or like I feel like I put a lot of like multiple elements or fragments there, and a viewer subconsciously standing in front of it like kind of puzzle it or like makes the narrative themselves, and I'm very interested in that, you know, as if like I'm just putting this characters or elements for and then it can be built or like finished, because like I think I mean I think about narrative in a very without beginning and end, but there are this yeah.
And I think that it even feels present in the way that you've started breaking you and this has been for a while now, breaking beyond the board and the canvas and thinking about
these works are like older. They're they're from
right.
2017 I think, and yeah, it says there and so I think that part also like just to this expansion to the space, it was also like I think gets to this part of like always looking for a space, always looking for a ground, you know. And I think the idea of ground in the painting is just such a you know very very like relevant conversation to the painting, but I think I'm always like looking for a ground, and like this expansion of to the actual space, the wall is also like, I think it's related to that, or the idea of like looking like always looking for a space to work with or to work in, you know. And yeah.
And Kaveri, I know, I mean, like, while I think your work probably like kind of breaks away from narrative in a more like obvious way, I think that there's something, you know, a lot of your work, and you've talked about this in the past. I wonder if it, with your paintings, I wonder if that was the case with these works at all too, of like sometimes thinking about a conversation you had in the past, or like something that hasn't happened, or something, a moment in time.
Right. Yeah, I guess narrative for me is very specific for each piece. But I think specificity versus ambiguity is something that I think about, I guess, with narrative, and how specific a thing can be for me first and foremost, and then how ambiguous it could be for the viewer, and or like even coded perhaps. And I guess narrative via language, narrative via words, slash people, like words and people in particular. And or like especially for these drawings, or that show before these drawings, was like kind of thinking about this idea of I was giving myself like words or phrases, for example, like one was like wish it was otherwise, lack of. And then just the idea of like wish it was otherwise has this connotation of like longing for something that the past, or wish it could be a particular way that it's not currently. I guess like lingering in. So narrative for me, or like stories for me, come through words or phrases that I create while thinking about like silly conversations that I'm having with my parents or friends or people. But I think majority of the time when I was in Ohio, it was constantly like excavating through like forgotten memories, perhaps, that they're bound to come up because, you know, I'm back with family and back with surroundings of the familiar, or, you know, just comfortable surroundings. And I think the memories suddenly become vivid. And I think using those memories, not even using it, I guess using sounds like not good for some reason. It's like using, like I'm using it for like, yeah, I guess maybe not
exploiting.
Yeah, maybe not using, but like it's bound, I guess bound, like it's bound to happen subconsciously. But then like literally in these particularly in these drawings, just because the headspace is so much into these like particular stories that I'm, you know, it's like, again, location and surroundings are important also for the narrative, because I have to, it's like I can hear like chit chat that my parents are doing downstairs, and I'm upstairs in this like quote unquote quiet space, but at the same time picking up on things from here and there. And yeah, I guess like, yeah, I think words for me are more associated with narrative. And then again, like, yeah, like wish it was otherwise, like it's like basically like inner dialogues, and that kind of help create some sort of an image or a form. And then I also like look at past paintings or drawings that I've done when I begin something too, because I don't like the idea of disregarding the past, because I think through the past is the current. And I think constantly digging through or poking or finding my own like sense of space and place via language for these narratives, I guess.
I mean, I'd love to like maybe get into a conversation also about that, like breaking out of that and what that means in terms of like even all of the ways that in which the three of you use abstraction, and how that feels like it's about a search for new possibilities of representation, or like thinking about radical transformation. Would love to hear from anyone who feels compelled to go first.
I guess I was again thinking about this or that, because this drawing that's up right now, it's like it has like this grid or this like window.
Yeah.
But it could be a window for me, but it could be like a TV for someone else, or I don't know, just like a rectangle too. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be a thing per se, but yeah, I think for me it's like, what does it do beyond this, like how big is this, like 14 by 11 thing? Like, can we go beyond the surface, the physical surface? And does this, for me, it's like it's this like imaginative space. Does that, what we're looking at, does it let us go into this world of, I think what Maryam was saying before, like this or maybe she wasn't, but like I guess like this idea of like taking it beyond what we're physically seeing, like putting our own interpretations, like it could be X for me, but it could be Y for someone else. And yeah, the fluidity and like I guess.
Maybe I'm waiting for Anjuli to.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah, but I'd love to also speak about your sculptures, Anjuli, because I think they also speak to processing and digestion and digesting, like in terms of processing and internalizing.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about digestion as like a metaphor for the slow process of just processing of, especially with grief, which is, the slow kind of disgusting process, which is kind of illegible, abstract, like unseeable for the most part. I know this, I kind of started thinking about the intestines because I was thinking about sort of this kind of archetypal shape of the spiral, which was appearing a lot in the paintings around like kind of ritualistic looking fire, like labyrinths. And then there's like the bodily process of digestion. So I don't know, I was just sort of kind of in a lull and I wanted to try something different. So I started making these ceramic works, which are very kind of like raw and not, these are like the first things I've made. So I'm not sure exactly how to think of them. But it's just sort of the process of making them was a way for me to keep thinking about these ideas. And then seeing images of these photographed from the side, I started thinking about like a volcano, which is sort of another kind of like slow tectonic like process that leads to this kind of like cyclical, crazy, violent reaction. So I've been painting volcanoes since seeing this. So yeah, so it all kind of goes back to like these cyclical sort of abstracted narratives, I guess, that keep kind of keeps folding back on itself.
And can you speak to, like, I think read up the thing, like when you talk about your work in terms of like processing or incubation as a space that could lead to transformation, I feel like it feels very present in
I was like, thinking back to this sort of like idea of incubation, which is like this processing of, in this case with grief, it's like something really reality disrupting. It's a lot of like, you're kind of forced to face like the ugliest, depleting, like most depleting parts of life. And I think, you know, despite that inevitability of death and so on, there is a possibility to imagine different outcomes. So for me, it's sort of like this, this processing kind of leads to like this idea of imagining like a different world, different outcomes for like if you're thinking about another person who is gone, so thinking where they could be. I think that is kind of a radical place to be in, because it goes beyond reality as we see it. So there's like kind of a magical, like an element of like magical thinking to grief, I think, which I said before, but anyway, so yeah, I guess, I mean, and also going back to like what you were saying at the beginning, like after the summer. So, I mean, I was thinking about grief a lot already before, but just, I think like during the summer, during the uprisings, I thought it was kind of seeing like that, like an outward, external way of grief, whereas there's, you know, in the protest, that was like an external processing of grief that did lead to change and changes in thinking. So,
yeah. And yeah, Maryam, do you want to speak to that at all?
No, I mean, I was enjoying Anjuli talking, and I kept, when I was looking at the work and she was describing, I was thinking about so much about like becoming, transformation and change, and I was like, I think that change also, like for me, maybe it's like into the space of the painting is more like kind of this poetic approach of moving from one surface to the next, you know, and it's like as if the body is moving from one thing to the next thing, and then that change and transformation maybe happens through like through the materiality of painting, you know, and I think like then I think it becomes then always searching for the next surface. It's like as if like things are moving in a way that I feel like sometimes I try to come up with a name for it. Like I call it like poetic abstraction, and and I was thinking about what Anjuli is saying, like this becoming this other magical space or being, which I think it's it exists in this futuristic way that I think when we were talking about time, I was like how I keep thinking about like using the past to address the future, or like somehow this transformation or journey, or I don't know, or like these things that I'm calling it like the poetic moving from one surface to the next surface, then that happens.
I guess I was gonna say like one quick thing about time, because I was just thinking about, I don't know if you, Maryam and Anjuli think about this, but I was trying to recall before this, trying to like put myself back into this headspace of creating these particular drawings, and how that time just seems like like ages ago, but it was just December, January that I started to do these. And yeah, I guess, yeah, time is quite telling. I mean, this idea of evolution, or like slowly being evolved into something else, or taking like a different presence. But yeah, it's hard to kind of, or like, when you're, I guess sometimes music does that, that when I look at a piece that maybe I'm not able to fully remember the particular story or person that I was thinking about while I was, I guess, narrative, I guess, if I'm not able to like remember the particular narrative, but if the external thing, whether there's sound, the sound that's around me, or voices or music, that helps to like bring back certain memories. So this idea of like time traveling is something that I've also started thinking about, is going back into your own shoes of being a different version from the past or something. And but then I remember, like, in that moment, it's also not that present moment that I'm thinking about. Usually it's the time before that too. So it's like a cycle again, like Anjuli was saying, like it's a cyclical. And so just, yeah, time traveling is a way of like remembering or being in a space, but actually not being able to be in that space again physically, but also mentally, because there's no way that I can think those things again that I was thinking while I was like drawing on the wood panels. So the specificity is lost, and then it's all hazy and ambiguous. So the idea of specificity versus ambiguity, I guess, through time.
That also feels like that also feels like it speaks to your medium here with like working on wood, considering that you're not normally like working on very porous,
yeah, that's true,
like,
yeah,
material,
this
like
is
the
very new
weave.
to
It's
me.
really interesting. I'm just like, you can't penetrate through.
Exactly, yeah, it just stays on top. So it's layers on layers, whereas with burlap it kind of seeps through. And I'm not layering as much on burlap. It's more of a sandwich, whereas with these it's a slab. So like thinking about sandwiches versus slab, it's like slab kind of like goes up and up, sandwich like combines. So I guess, yeah, that's the difference. But yeah, I think slab of memories, or like again, like time seeping through versus time staying there, like on top of each other. I guess there's a difference between that too, I guess. Seeping versus staying on top.
Anyone else? So we could go to Q&A and break it out of this a bit.
Thank you so much, Ambika, Anjuli, Maryam, and Kaveri. It was so beautiful. And, I'm living with this exhibition since February, right? Yeah. And every day going into the space and how people are reacting to it. Because when they walk in, with the title, right? Being monster in it, they just want to see something very direct message in here. But I'm like, then they go through the press release, they go through your works. And actually, Maryam, one person made a comment that they were thinking like the color overflow. It's just that violence overflowing. Like the violence in the painting, like, so of course we can come back. I don't know if you ever heard that before, but there was one of that, like they were trying to make sense of that, because for that narrative, for that space, which is occupying with the paint. But of course we can get to that. But Ambika, I have one question for you from one of our participants. Ambika, when you were selecting the works from the three artists, were you actively looking at them as a responses to the call? And with Bhanu Kapil's work, or at some point it probably all came together, I guess, as a whole exhibition. I wanted to know, when in the process did it come together from a curator's perspective?
It did feel like so kind of collaborative, because I think it came out of these conversations that I had with each of them. And as you could see from the dates, like a lot of this is existing work. I mean, like Maryam's, your works are from 2017, and Anjuli, your work it's quite recent. It's from 2019 to 2020. So I think I initially was like, who can I talk to? Like whose works that whose works I like. I like Kaveri I've known for a couple of years now, and was like excited about the opportunity to work with her, and thought her work both gets at, but not in such a like direct way at what I'm thinking about. And so it felt like a nice like meeting point between what she considers in her work and what I'm considering for the show. And then but it was really exciting. Like this was the case where Kaveri was creating new work. How much like Kaveri was thinking or not thinking about this kind of prompt, I'll let her speak to that in a moment. But then like Anjuli, you had a show at Y2K, and I met you at that gallery. That was our first meeting. That was an actual in-person meeting, the only in-person meeting that happened in the course of making this show. And I thought those conversations felt so generative. And that was when I hadn't made it known that I was doing this, but felt like this was so exciting to me that an artist is also looking at the same writing that I'm looking at, and was really excited about working with her, kind of followed her work like in a creepy online way one does. And then it felt very like, I think Maryam came up quite organically. Like it felt, you had a show at Rachel Effner at the time, and during the course of like me feeling out who would be right for this, and those were new works, not these works, that I think even more like kind of extend outward from the wall and like interact with the gallery. But I'd like Kaveri and Maryam have also known each other since grad school at SAIC, and like I know Kaveri's like talked about her work being in conversation with Maryam's before, but like they've never gotten to show together. So that felt like a very exciting possibility too. And like from each of the conversations, that just like firmed up my excitement to work with each of them. And we didn't really get, these are such strange times. We didn't get time together in the gallery. Our only time together apart from now was like a week ago. Finally, after preparing to like for this program. But Kaveri, I'd love to like maybe, since your work actually was like is new and like after our conversations, like I'm happy to hear about your thoughts.
Right. Yeah, I remember, I think it was like I can't remember the specific month, but I think maybe it was October, because I was last year, because I remember I was finishing like those paintings for a show, and you had reached out, and I was kind of overwhelmed at that moment. But I remember saying that, okay, I'm gonna take this challenge for Ohio. I remember thinking that to myself, and the only thing I thought was like, I'm going to be trying like different materials this time and a different process. I think I started with thinking about it like materially, and I never worked on wood panels. I never really worked with graphite on wood panels, so it was a daunting task. But I think those were, I think the process and material, and I had drawn before, like I had what was I gonna say? Actually, I haven't been able to draw in New York as much as I have been able to draw elsewhere. I feel like whether it's like a residency that I went to in Fisher's Island Lighthouse Works, where I think it was just extremely quiet again. I think the surroundings really play a role in whether I can draw or paint, and that really dictates my mental space. And I think the only thing I said to myself, okay, like Ambika has a show that she proposed, and I'm going to be drawing on wood panels. And I think Ohio, the time spent there, it just happened organically. And I think, I don't know if I'd mentioned this already, but each drawing kind of took like weeks to do, which is kind of very slow for me, and kind of like similar to the paintings. Like each painting probably takes like a couple of weeks to do if I'm going to the studio daily. But even though I was like, I was not like I was teaching part-time, but then I was also teaching was the only other thing, and then spending time with family. I guess the point is that they were just like extremely slow and process, like these drawings. But other than the process and the material, I knew that somehow it would fit into this. Yeah, and then Maryam and I have shared like studio spaces together at SAIC. This is like, I don't know how many years has it been, like 5 years now, maybe. 2016 when we graduated. So yeah, our studios were like right next to each other, and I had never shown with Maryam and always admired her work. So I thought this would be like a good way to kind of come together like this. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but I don't know if I went off tangent.
Thank you so much. Maryam, do you want to address, if you want to, you don't have to explain it.
Sure, just briefly, thanks to Ambika for bringing us together in this show, because I was waiting, I was like, the fact that we have gone to grad school together needs to come up at some point. So that was a good way. And I mean, to end my part with like the violence, I think I'm actually very interested in that comment, because that doesn't usually come up, even though that's the way that I actually think about the work and in relation. I feel like there are a lot of times that people come to me and they say like, wow, there are the pictorial part of the painting, the painting look very like, there are signs of violence, and I'm not attempting or trying to create violent work, but for me it's more, I usually say actually the verticality for me is the most violent part, and I think it has continued into my recent work too. And I keep thinking about the space that they occupy in this vertical manner, in this confrontational way, and really just something in front of you, no matter like what kind of a body or like they are in different range. And I think like that confrontational aspects of it has to do with the violent, but also I think like I quite deal with the work in a very, like, my work looks very like, kind of, people think that I make the work in a very soft way, or I don't know how to say it, like very gentle, but actually quite, it's opposite, because if you go back to the previous picture, there are a lot of, maybe it was the other piece.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, there are a lot of like nails. I don't know if it shows through nails into the painting, that on the surface it looks like just the visual language part of the work, but they're all coming out from the back. That just that level that I usually do it after the work is done, and there is always this moment of I can lose the work because it's wood panel and I'm hammering the nails into it, and the work is done and I'm doing that, and just a few times it has happened that some part of the work is like kind of broken, and so that's the continuation of it. But yeah, definitely this dripping or this extension to the space that turns back to the body, like the one that is standing in front of it, that's definitely something. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I don't know, Ambika, if you mentioned in the beginning, I was just trying to juggle with Zoom hosting. I want to let everyone know, actually, Bhanu Kapil, she so generous, and Ambika, thank you so much for reaching out to her. She couldn't join us for the event today because of course, busy schedules and all of that, and time difference. So she did a small recording for us. I actually posted it's not small, it's actually 15 minutes long. Ambika, can you talk a little about that recording? I posted a link in the chat. So please, everyone, if you haven't had a chance, it's extremely important and very, the ambiance in her voice. And Ambika, do you want to talk about it?
I'll talk about it very briefly, or just like talk about how it came up, which was like,
Sure.
I kind of emailed her, was like, mentioned that this show was happening and was like considering other forms of programming, and then and she very kindly like responded, and we had a phone call and was like talking about also just like our exhaustion around this time too, and like how like maybe we don't do another Zoom program. Maybe this is something that could live in another way. And she then spoke about wanting to like potentially doing a recording, and how she's Incubation: A Space for Monsters has been out of print for a number of years, but there's going to be like a re-release. And so she had she reads a bit, and she sits outdoors. So this recording is like, seems like she's in a field of daffodils, and it's so like, you can hear the birds in the background, you can hear a tawny owl. She stops and like observes these things around her as she's reading excerpts from like part of a new essay and introduction for Incubation: A Space for Monsters. It felt very like, it feels like she's very present in the recording. It's really lovely, and feels like it exists very much as like, she seems to be speaking directly, I think, to you three, and it seems like a really sweet gift. And I don't know, I like at this time that things can exist in other ways beyond, not that there's like, I love this and interacting with you all, but like beyond Zoom programs, like how else can we think about I don't know, creating material related to shows at this time? I'd love to, if any of you want to, because I know the three of you heard it a little in advance, if you want to talk about your own responses to it.
I would love to hear that, actually. Yes, because she is directly addressing to three of you.
I should just say that the way that she ends it, that her mom she talks about the color of daffodils and the way that they get their, like the color, the yellow from the sun. But her mom says that it's also vice versa. And also the fact that apparently her mom didn't know about daffodils or like the name of it, and she was saying it in her own language. And I felt that it was so visceral. The whole it was very, the voice, I think, like somehow it's interesting that we started from like the sound, and the sound like become the shadow and all of it. And I think the way that she talks is like, the sound is so bodily, the way that the voice that she has. And yeah, it really was beautiful. I almost feel like maybe we should just play it and then say goodbye. Let it be. Yeah.
And I really strongly encourage to all of our participants, our guests, please, if you get a moment right after this talk, I would say spend 15 minutes, because I think I heard it at least 3 times. And it's just a beautiful spring note. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we thought about it at the end of this, but then not like 15 minutes of like staring into space with each other might be too much for you all.
So Anjuli and
Monsters,
right?
What was that?
Anjuli and Kaveri, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the last time the 4 of us chatted briefly via Zoom was like the day that I had listened to it. I was like, I guess the day that Ambika had sent it. I was like started walking from my apartment to the studio, and I just listened to it while I was in my headphones. And yeah, I think like first, like Bhanu was like living in my mind through her writings, and then now it's like one step further is I feel like living through her voice. Yeah, I think like the vividness, as I think mentioned in the earlier on, yeah, I think like her voice was extreme, like it felt like she was in front of us, and or like I was trying to imagine who this person is, you know, and I think the way, yeah, visceral is a good word that Maryam used. I think it felt really vivid and visceral, and you know, she took out like 15, you know, time to do this. I think that was really yeah, like a genuine thought, and yeah, the relationship. I think I can't remember the word that she, I don't know if it was Punjabi or Hindi that she
Punjabi.
used. Was it Punjabi? Okay.
Yeah. Like daf or dil or something. Yeah,
Oh,
right.
okay,
Yeah.
right.
Like
Yeah, I
like
don't
a
know
pun,
Punjabi
but neither do I.
but yeah, I
lost.
think like just like
Although dil, I assume is heart, but
dil
like
is hard. Yeah, I think da. Yeah, I don't know what the
daf is maybe like dam or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like her coming, like sharing like the personal note and then going back into telling us like, hey, I'm here outside, like sitting in front of this, like in this garden, you know. So I think like again, like the traveling via her voice was, yeah, quite lovely. I listened to it twice. And yeah, I was appreciative of her time for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I too listened to it twice. Yeah, it was just felt like a really like nice act of like care for the show, like towards the artists who are in a show, kind of brought together by her and her ideas.
The sisterhood all around the globe.
Yeah, very generous.
I thought, yeah, the back and forth between her kind of like reading from kind of this like poetic voice to like being in the present, surrounded by daffodils and talking about the bird noises. And, yeah, just very present. Yeah, very, very nice.
Thank you so much. So I think we're at 7:40, so perfect timing. So I wanted to check with audience again if you have any questions. So if not, I was gonna say thank you all. Thank you so much for being in this space. We have this show for last 3 days now. Of course, many more collaborations to come. So we actually have an event tomorrow too. Again, I'm posting a link in the chat. I do wonder, Ambika, sometimes, like when we go back to being in the space, and to all of as well, like when we start having these conversations in space, how I remember it. Of course, I miss it. But I think being on this platform too, like I think I'm seeing you all through. Of course, I have talked to you via phone, but I'm seeing 3 of you first time here, and living with all of your works, I don't feel this is the first time. So, so I just wanted to let you know, thank you so much for sharing your work. Incredible, again, incredible experience, and people walking in the space, the way they loved it. And Ambika, thank you so much. With your tight schedule, with so much going on, you really went ahead with this project. And so all of our dedicated audience, thank you.
No, I loved every minute of this. So yeah, it was, did not feel like time was like, it was stretching me thin. This was like very, it just like energized me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you from me, Ambika. I want you to say last word, and then we can say bye to everyone.
Enormous thank you to Anjuli Rathod, Maryam Hoseini, and Kaveri Raina for this conversation and for the conversations we had throughout this process and show. And even though we couldn't be together in person, I feel like Aisha's right. Like, feels like very, I don't know, like there's a real kind of like, I don't know, energy between the 3 of you. Yeah, like psychic connection here. So it was really wonderful to be working with you this whole time. And thank you so much again to 12 Gates Arts, and everyone on their team, and Aisha Natif in particular, for this opportunity. And yeah, so thrilled to have been reunited with you guys and through this. And yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Yes, and I It's going to be a beautiful weekend. I don't know, wherever you're logging in, wherever time zone you are, enjoy your weekend, and we will be seeing each other soon again.
Take
Thank you
care.
all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Anisha.
Bye.